music composers and their spiritual legacy. The next period that we're going to be discussing is called the Baroque period. And I've already shared with you that if the Renaissance was non-religious, the Baroque period is very religious. And you hear names such as Bach. There are a lot of people who have heard Bach's music that just don't realize it. And we have just come out of Halloween. And sadly to say, that's normally when we hear Bach's music. Sadly to say. So what am I saying? I'm saying that this piece by Bach But there's so much more to Bach than that piece. My students always used to say they've heard that piece before, and that's where I prefer to stop the discussion because I'm sure it's not in an area where I want to hear about. But that particular piece is a toccata by Bach. Bach used that piece when he would go around and check the condition of organs for other organists. He would just use that as a warm-up piece, and at the same time, it's become one of his favorite pieces in this country. But Bach did so much more, and I'd like to share with you a little bit about Bach, because when we talk about Bach, he begins what we call the 4 Bs of music. Bach is the first B. Beethoven is the second B. Brahms is the third B. And another composer named Bartók becomes the 4th B of music. Certainly, Bach deserves the standing as the first B of music. In order to get close to Bach's surroundings, you'd have to go to Leipzig, Germany. And Leipzig has been in the news a lot just lately. Leipzig, Germany is a very progressive city, and I would just like to share with you the fact that Bach was the organist and director of music at the main Protestant church. This is our first Protestant, and so therefore I'd like to share with you the fact that he conducted the choir, he conducted the orchestra, and he played the organ for this 4-hour service. Now there's a service you all would like to belong to. I'm sure we'd have to drag you out of there. But the service, Bach was a Protestant. And I think that many of you know that the Lutheran Church emanates from Germany. And so that's exactly the type of church that Bach was serving. He was the director of music at St. Thomas Church. The church is still standing, and if you ever get there, I hope that you will go to that church, because up in the balcony, the back balcony of the church, was the organ, the choir, and the orchestra. And Bach had to conduct all of these in that 4-hour worship service. St. Thomas. I like the church. It's the only church I've been to where when you leave the church and go out the front of the church, they have a statue of their favorite organist. Now, I'm not trying to put a bug in your ear and say that that should happen to me as well. But at the same time, that's how much they enjoyed the music of their favorite organist, J.S. Bach, Johann Sebastian Bach. What did he compose? Well, it doesn't stop. It just keeps on going. He's known as a composer and a virtuoso, organist, and teacher. Before each of his religious compositions, when he was composing them, he wrote the words, "Jesus, help." And at the end of the piece, he wrote, "To God alone be the glory." I've been playing a little bit of Bach's music here, besides that of our earlier composer. But Bach is this big piece. That was the piece that he used when he went to check out organs. Most people know Bach's music by just those three notes. And I remember when teaching, my students only had to hear the three notes and they knew the answer to the question already. But Bach wrote so much more. And I'd like to share with you just a little bit of some of the other pieces he wrote. But let me say this. The composer that we started with was Catholic. And in those days, they just had one line that they would sing. Bach comes along and takes everything that has just one line. In other words, if it was this piece, so what Bach is known for is filling in the notes. And so interestingly enough, all the hymnals say, if you're looking up the composer in the back of a hymnal, it says the piece was harmonized by Bach. Harmonized by Bach, not written by Bach, not devised by Bach, but it was harmonized. He took this and turned it into this. And so for that reason, we still use the music of Bach in the hymnals that we have today. He's written a lot of beautiful music, and at the same time, one that he has written that I think that you're going to be hearing at Christmas time, he takes this tune and he puts it with this. Then he gives you the melody. Then he comes back to it. He added so much more to it. And that particular piece that I just played is pretty much performed right around the Christmas season. Jesu, joy of man's desiring. Another one that is used in many of the churches right around the time of communion is O Sacred Head, now wounded. So that is his claim to fame and so much more. Please don't ever forget Bach, and please don't forget these 3 notes. You will hear them again. We're indebted to Bach because he did so much more. And would you believe he did all of that and he had 20 kids? That's 20 kids. And I should say that's 2 wives, if that's any consolation. Bach also, since he was starting out the Protestant era, you would be surprised to note that when the Protestants came along, they took a number of folk tunes that were already in existence and turned them into religious pieces. And, would you believe it? They knew that they were in something new, so they borrowed some of the Catholic tunes and put Protestant words to them. Bach had to write the music that the choir was going to sing. So many Saturday evenings he was up late, writing the music that he would rehearse the choir with the next morning and then sing in that service. Being a Protestant, they had something that was called cantatas. And Bach's cantatas, which they would give in this, I think I told you, this 4-hour church service. That's why it was so long. The choir had maybe an hour to do this, that, and the other, and so did everybody else. But the music that he wrote, the choir would rehearse that morning and then perform at that same church. 4 hours. I used to ask my students, what could happen in a 4-hour church service? And some of the answers I got were, well, it boggled their mind. They just weren't sure. Someone, I hope that they were not being serious, they said, well, I think you eat. The eating didn't take place. But they came up with some things like baptisms. They said reading scriptures. They said prayers. And I was surprised that many of them knew actually what went on in a church service. Don't forget, I said a 4-hour church service, and that is the service that Bach played for. And if you go and visit that church today, there's a nice big statue of Bach to greet you at the very front of the church yard. J.S. Bach, our first B in music.